listening to the Heartland Author Podcast. I am Aaron Apollo Camp. For the 60th and final episode of Season 5 of this podcast, I had the opportunity to interview poet and fellow downstate Illinoisan Anastasia Lindsey. Anastasia, who is from Decatur, Illinois, is the author of the poetry book Ocean, and in addition to her writing work, she is also a holistic healing practitioner. I'm here with Anastasia Lindsey, who is a poet and the author of the poetry book Ocean. Anastasia, welcome to the Heartland Author Podcast.
Hello, thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Now, you're originally from Decatur, Illinois, is that correct?
Correct, born and raised.
Now, what was Decatur like growing up for you?
It was okay. You know, there's not a lot of opportunities, I would say, so I did have to travel around a bit. Central Illinois, like Champaign and Springfield, even Chicago and St. Louis, Missouri. Just there's not a lot of opportunities. It is a rather smaller town. I would say it is advancing much more now that I'm getting older, but growing up, I definitely had to look outside of town for resources with writing and just, you know, trying to find fun activities to do. So it's getting better, but growing up, I definitely had to look elsewhere for fun.
Of course, Decatur was a big manufacturing hub back in the day, and a lot of the factories have closed, which means less opportunity there than people like a couple generations or so before you.
Yeah, absolutely. We still have a few, like ADM, Mueller, Caterpillar. So we do still have quite a few bigger companies still around. But yes, back in the day, it was very booming. And some of the buildings are still there. They're just vacant. So sometimes it is a little sad to see that, you know, when you're driving through town, you can't help but wonder, you know, what was Decatur like when it was a big manufacturing, booming, thriving city?
Now, feel free to further introduce yourself to our listeners.
Okay, absolutely. So, born and raised here in Decatur. I am a poet and author. I also have a holistic healing business where I specialize in Reiki, hypnosis, meditation, sound healing. I've always looked for natural ways to heal myself, not only of trauma and physical ailments, but just trying to live a healthier, more fulfilling life naturally. I come from a very beautiful family, very supportive and loving, which has helped my dreams thrive so much more quicker than I could have ever done alone. And I'm happy when I'm creating. I love creating music, songs, lyrics, poems, art. If I can create movement and create change, you know, creativity is not one of the things that limits me by any means. I'm always happy and thriving when I am creating. And I thrive in my empathy as well. I'm a very empathetic person. And my sensitivity is a gift, and I share that every time I speak because I know that there are other sensitive souls out there in the world. And I just want them to know that your sensitivity is a gift. And if I can show up in the world and speak about my sensitivity, I hope that it gives others the courage to do so as well. So I'm really just here on this earth to create change and to create movement and to rewrite the narrative. Like, let's rewrite our stories together.
Now, how did you teach yourself to write poetry?
So I definitely think I was born a poet, but like anything else, it is still a skill. And so I just did a lot of trial and error. And writing for me has always been therapeutic. And so I would write a poem if I was feeling something or went through a situation. And then I would go back and reread it. And then I would go read poetry, you know, whether it was by Maya Angelou or other poets, Pablo Neruda. And I would see how could I take their styles and create my own poem as well. So it was a lot of reading poetry, a lot of writing my own poetry, and then a lot of editing.
Now, without spoiling too much of Ocean, that's a poetry book, and what is it about?
Yeah, so it's a deeply healing book. When I wrote Ocean, I was ready to tell my story. I haven't always had a beautiful story. I have went through pain and trauma and heartbreak, and I wanted to share that with the world because I think we live in a society now where it's easy for us to just remain quiet. And, whether that's fear of being judged or being shamed, but I was ready to tell my story. And so Ocean is a really deeply therapeutic healing book. It was therapeutic for me to write. And so the first section is called Deep Waters. And Deep Waters is a section filled with poems where I talk about the pain and the trauma and the heartbreak and those times where I wasn't okay. And then I move on to Waiting, which is the second section. And that's kind of where the poems are filled where things were okay, but then they kind of would be not okay. And so it was like that in-between stage where I'm not where I used to be, but I'm definitely not where I would like to be. And then that brings us to The Shore, which is the third section in my book. And those are poems filled with love. Love for self, love for others, love for the earth and the planet and nature, just embodying the frequency of love. And then lastly, we have Sandcastles. And those are more playful in nature. And they also give the reader a teaser of the book that I'm currently writing now. So it's just to take the reader through waves of life. And that's how I came up with the title Ocean. There's going to be poems that create movement within the reader to either spark love or to spark healing, to ride the waves of life no matter what transition or phase that they are in. And then there's sections throughout, there's pages throughout my book where I call them lighthouse pages. And when you think about a lighthouse, it's safety. So these are really safety pages. If maybe the reader read a poem that is particularly triggering for them, that they can take a break from reading poetry and check in with themselves. How am I feeling? There's journal prompts, meditation exercises, action items for them to breathe, relax, drink water. Because a lot of times we don't check in with ourselves. Our bodies are always speaking to us. And I wanted an opportunity for the reader to check in with themselves and see how they're doing. So it's a deep moving book, but it's creating movement, and that's my goal for it.
Now, what are some challenges you've experienced as a poet and a writer?
Yeah, I would say I tend to get in my way a lot. And, when you write a poem, of course you want people to like it and you want people to be moved by it. But that can't be the reason why I write. I have to write because it feels good for me and because I know that no matter what, there's going to be someone out there that needed that poem or that enjoys that poem. And so sometimes I can get in my own way and I'm like, well, I don't like this poem, so other people might not either. But you have to remember that when it's your art and your passion and this is something that brings you joy, just put it out into the world. You have to step out of your own way and know that not everyone will like it, but there might be tons of people that like your poetry. And you just have to know that no matter what, it's okay and you are creating. And there's going to be, even if there's one person out in the world that loves your poem, that is still something to celebrate.
Now, do you intend to write more poetry books, and what are your favorite themes to write poetry about?
Yeah, so I am writing another poetry book, which is going to be connected to Ocean in a way, but quite differently. The themes will be different. It'll be more passion-driven. I tend to write about things that were painful for me as a way of releasing them and no longer holding on to them. I like to write about love, heartbreak, trauma, healing. This next book is definitely outside of my comfort zone, but I'm going to talk about passion and desire and your dreams and that fuel and that fire that we get when we really like something or somebody or an event or a situation where we feel alive and we feel free and liberating. So the theme for this next book is definitely something that I've never really wrote about, but as I step into this next chapter of my life, I have been filled with like fire, and I want to talk about that. And also I hope that this next book gives people the opportunity to find their fire as well.
Now, explain how you use energy healing and holistic modalities to heal yourself.
Yeah, so I don't know if you're familiar with Reiki or sound healing. Have you heard much about that or experienced sessions yourself?
No.
Okay, so Reiki is energy healing. It's the universal life force energy that we are surrounded by. And I just am a channel. I can channel that energy through me and onto the client. And it's just soothing, healing energy. So a lot of my clients come to me for anxiety, depression, if they're stressed, if they have a lot of weight on their shoulders. This energy is very soothing to the soul. A lot of clients leave feeling peaceful and calm. They sleep better. Their health is better. So I use Reiki on myself as well. And I feel like it creates that clear channel for me to be the best poet that I can be. And then sound healing, I use a lot of sound healing. So I use crystal singing bowls. And they are just like everything else in this world, energy, and our bodies respond to that. And I like to think of our bodies as like a musical instrument. If anyone's played the guitar before, they know that they have to tune the guitar before they play it for it to sound its best. And our bodies are just the same way. The sound bowls tune our body. They get us back into balance and alignment so that we can operate at our optimal best. So I use a lot of meditation practices, Reiki, sound healing, so that I can operate at my best, so that I can be the poet that I was born to be.
Now, I have one final question, and this is an interesting one. On the main page of your website, there's a photo of you that shows the tattoo on, I believe it's your left shoulder and upper arm area. Is there an interesting story behind that tattoo?
Yeah, this is a great question. So there's a face, as you can see, and it's very holistic in nature, and it symbolizes me and the calmness that I bring to the world and the peacefulness that I embody no matter what I'm doing. You know, right now I'm speaking to you and I'm bringing a calm, gentle energy to this interview. And I'm surrounded by nature, so you'll see like leaves and a little bit of flowers and just like neat, intricate detail because that's who I am. And when I'm grounded in nature, I thrive and I create beautiful work, and I take what's natural in the world and I amplify it to create something natural and beautiful within myself and for the world. So I have added on to my tattoo since then, so I'll have to update that picture. But right now I just have leaves and flowers because I feel like when you think about nature and the leaves and the flowers, it's very healing. It's very calming. When people buy flowers, it brings them happiness. And I just want that to be who I am and how I show up in the world.
Well, Anastasia, you are a wonderful guest for the Season 5 finale of the Heartland Author Podcast, and I thank you for appearing on this podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure, and I love to share what I do and talk with people and meet with people, so I appreciate you having me on as a guest.
It's been wonderful to produce 60 episodes in a little over 9 months, but I'm going to go on summer break from the Heartland Author Podcast for a couple of months. Season 6 of this podcast will premiere in August, and starting with Season 6, I'll be doing 5-month seasons of this podcast going forward. Until I return from summer break, this is Aaron Apollo Camp reminding y'all to write your imagination. See y'all in August. You can learn more about me and my book writing projects at camparinapollo.wixsite.com/authoraac. You can follow me on Twitter and Facebook at AuthorAAC and on Instagram at AACScribe. Copyright 2023, Aaron Apollo Camp, all rights reserved. This podcast episode is intended for the private listening of our audience. Any reuse or retransmission of this podcast episode without the express written consent of the podcast host is prohibited, except under fair use guidelines. Royalty-free music and sound effects obtained from https://www.zapsplat.com.